With upcoming games like Elden Ring and the Demon Souls remake, it's easy to be caught up in the abundance of newer games From Software has to offer and ignore their older games. I'm a victim of this personally since I've spent over 150 hours playing Dark Souls 3. It's a really good game and I really wanted that platinum. But I was recently thinking back at some of my favorite games from my childhood, such as Super Mario Sunshine, Spider-Man 2, and, most importantly, Lost Kingdoms. I came across Lost Kingdoms when I went to a used DVD store with my parents around 2008. I remember it being the only game in the store that caught my eye. I thought the cover looked cool with the dragon, and it caught my attention because of it. And honestly, picking up that game was probably the best blind video game purchase I ever made. From Software has built itself a cult following with its unique games such as Bloodborne and Dark Souls. Their games are notorious for the difficulty but also extremely addictive and rewarding gameplay. So where did this all start, and where did these games get their unique vision, aesthetic, and atmosphere from? In this video, I will be comparing the 2002 From Software game Lost Kingdoms to the 2009 game Demon Souls, along with a few comparisons to the 2011 Dark Souls as well. I'll be showcasing the similarities in these games and argue that Lost Kingdoms influenced the overall aesthetic, gameplay mechanics, storytelling, among other things in the Souls series. I played Bloodborne, followed by Dark Souls 3, since at the time I didn't own a PlayStation 3. But it was my experience playing Dark Souls 3 that triggered a feeling of deja vu. I will never forget the first time I lit the bonfire at the High Wall of Lothric, and really took everything in. I don't know if it was the HUD design, the castle, the enemies, or what that made me think, wow, this reminds me of Lost Kingdoms. I couldn't knock that feeling of similarity, so when I finally Googled From Software and saw that they were the developer behind Lost Kingdoms as well, everything just came together. It finally made sense why I found the atmosphere so strikingly familiar. When discussing older From Software games, everyone talks about Kingsfield and sometimes even Evergrace, but no one really talks about Lost Kingdoms. I'm almost certain it's because of the GameCube exclusivity and its current rarity, not to mention that Lost Kingdoms 2 is sitting at over $200 on eBay currently. It's not an easy game to get your hands on. There's almost no resources online about the game either. I honestly had to go back and replay the entire game, writing down all the different character dialogues and item descriptions, since a lot of the walkthroughs I watched beforehand didn't interact much with the world. In short, this was much more hard work than I anticipated. But I love this game and the Souls games, so I found so many similarities that just made this whole adventure worthwhile. So get ready, because we're about to go down a rabbit hole. In this chapter, I'll be going into depth on the introduction and setup of Lost Kingdoms, followed by comparison and introduction and lore between Demon Souls and Lost Kingdoms. In Lost Kingdoms, you play as Princess Katia, who's the daughter of King Theobane of the Kingdom of Alanja. The game starts by introducing us to the threat of the Black Fog. The introduction states, the disappearance of a small forest was the first sign of the approaching evil. One morning, villagers awoke to find a solid wall of fog where the forest should have been. Some men, braver than others, ventured into the pitch black mist. They were never heard from again. The next day, the lake disappeared into the swirling mists. It was not long before the impenetrable mist enshrouded the village itself in perpetual darkness. Where once there had been life, now there was nothing but an impenetrable mist that turned day into night. By ancient covenant, the rulers of the Five Kingdoms had banned all interaction between their nations. Now, the Five Kings abandoned their isolation and met to look for a solution. Sadly, none could offer a plan to defeat the Black Fog. Terrifying rumors spread throughout the land. Some whispered tales of an ageless evil reawakened. During the beginning of the game in Alanja Castle, there's a script written on the wall where the runestone is kept. It can be read by the player. The left wall reads, "The Great One said unto us, I present you with these 5 runestones, to protect you from he who would destroy you. You and your heirs are charged with the task of guarding the runestones for all of eternity. Honor your duty, and you shall be rewarded with everlasting prosperity." The right side of the wall reads, "We, the runestone bearers, hereby divide the land into 5 realms, as prescribed by the Great One. We swear by the runestones that we will uphold the sacred covenant from now until the end of eternity. It is most likely that the Great One in reference here is the God of Harmony, the one who sealed the God of Destruction and the God of Creation away. Arguably, the God of Harmony is a being more powerful out of the 3. As harmony represents agreement and peace between differences, the God of Harmony would assumably be the one to ensure peace between creation and destruction. In addition, I went to From Software's website and went to their current page on Lost Kingdoms, looking for an official synopsis of the game I could compare the introduction to. There wasn't much there to look at, so I got an idea. I used the Wayback Machine and went to From Software's website starting in 2002. When translating the 2002 Japanese site into English, a portion reads, "People had rumors the demon was revived. The kingdom of Alanja, the kingdom in the central part of the continent, was at stake. The black fog that suddenly appeared from the bottom of the earth began to cover the castle in an instant." In the official and final released introduction, where the fog comes from is never mentioned, but this translation lets us know that it emerged from, quote, "the bottom of the earth," which should be some sort of hint signifying that the fog came from someplace far below. In Lost Kingdoms 2, in the library of Grenfoel Cathedral, a scroll the player can read reveals that the body of the god of harmonies slumbers deep in the soil. In comparison to demon souls, the old one is found below the Nexus. It's possible that the god of destruction was asleep below the earth, similarly to that of the god of harmony. I know some of you are probably wondering, well, what does this have to do with Dark Souls or Demon Souls, the majority of it anyway? Well, I'm going to play the introduction of Demon Souls, and I want you to listen closely to what is said in the introduction. Keep in mind what I just explained surrounding Lost Kingdom's fog, its gods, and the trapped/sleeping demon being revived below the earth.
King Alant XII, by channeling the power of souls, brought unprecedented prosperity to his northern kingdom of Boletaria. That is, until the colorless deep fog swept across the land. Boletaria was cut off from the outside world, and those who dared penetrate the deep fog never returned. But Valarfax of the royal twin fangs broke free from the fog and told the world of Boletaria's plight. That the old King Alant had aroused the Old One, the great beast below the Nexus, from its eternal slumber, and that a colorless fog had swept in, unleashing terrible demons. The demons hunt down men and claim their souls. Those who lose their souls also lose their minds. The mad attack the sane, and chaos reigns. Valarfax spoke of the enticing power of the demon souls. Each time a demon claims a human soul, the demon's own soul is invigorated by the life force, and the power of a mature demon soul is beyond human imagination. The legend spread quickly. Mighty warriors were drawn to the accursed land, but none have returned. Bjor of the Twin Fangs, Yurt the Silent Chief, Sage Urbane, Skurver the Wanderer, the Sixth Saint Astraea and her knight Garl Vinland, and Sage Frake the Visionary. The colorless deep fog slowly creeps beyond Boletaria's borders. Humankind faces a slow and steady extinction. The deep fog will eventually swallow all lands near and far. But Boletaria has one final hope. A lone warrior who has braved the baneful fog. Has the land found its savior? Or have the demons found a new slave?
Honestly, I found it quite shocking how similar the stories were in those introductions. Between Lost Kingdoms and Demon Souls, the stories are very similar. The fog in both games are spreading towards their respective kingdoms. Both fogs contain demons that were not there previously and that are en route to destroy the world. Both fogs were triggered by the reawakening of an ancient evil that was previously asleep below the earth. In Demon Souls, that being the Old One, and in Lost Kingdoms, that being the God of Destruction. Both of them were reawakened by an individual seeking power and becoming a vessel for that demon. Voltaria was, quote, cut off from the outside world, similarly to how Alanja was cut off from the rest of the kingdoms for hundreds of years. I could go on, but I want to keep this chapter exclusively focused on introductions, so I will definitely go more into depth with lore and characters in the following chapters. In this chapter, I'll be going over similarities in the protagonists and how they affect the mood and influence the atmosphere of the games similarly. Disparity, loneliness, and being forced to fight when all odds are against you is something that is shared between both characters you play as in Demon's Souls and Lost Kingdoms. In Lost Kingdoms, King Theobane goes off to find a way to protect the people of the kingdom and find a way to stop the Black Fog, as the fog has reached the gates of the castle. He tells Katia, "The Black Fog must be stopped. We will not be safe here forever. I would not leave you here alone, but a king's first duty is to his people. You will understand someday." This statement sets the foundation of Katia's role in the kingdom prior to the fog. Her father believes she's naive and doesn't understand the role of being a leader. He thinks she won't prioritize the people of the kingdom above herself, and maybe at this point in time, he's right. The shot opens up with her sitting on a throne, surrounded by a multitude of guards. She clearly isn't facing any danger, and this possibly hints to a sheltered and safe life, especially since this is in the middle of the Black Fog. Later in the opening scene, her father tells her of a runestone in the castle, and to find it if the castle is attacked and flee. When Katia attempts to leave the castle to go after her father, a guard tells her, "I'm afraid I cannot let you pass, Your Highness. It is too dangerous outside." She then goes down a hallway and finds a runestone in a chest. When the runestone is picked up, an unknown voice says, "Guardian of the Sacred Covenant, the power of the cards flows in your blood. Unleash their power." A fight occurs against two skeletons, which may look a bit familiar. The fight ends, and an old woman named Gerd appears in the hallway, questioning Katia and her abilities. The old woman states, "You're not the most fearsome warrior in the kingdom. I don't suppose you have a burly brother stashed away somewhere." Some other YouTubers have said this quote was sexist, outdated, or some translation error, but I disagree, to an extent. I believe it may have been said to reinforce the idea that Katia is inherently weak, just like the Slayer of Demons you play as in Demon's Souls. Both Katia and the Slayer of Demons start off as fragile and bound to fail. They are unfairly put in a situation where they are forced to begin a pilgrimage to fulfill their duty. In Dark Souls, the cursed undead has no choice but to seek Lord Gwyn and fulfill the prophecy. Katia also has no choice but to accept her role as the guardian of the Covenant and fulfill her duty as one. In the plains of Roal, Gerd tells Katia, "Whether you like it or not, you must stand up and fight." These characters never wanted to be in these situations, yet the situation was forced upon them, and they must do the seemingly impossible to save the world. In addition, Atsushi Taniguchi, the producer of Lost Kingdoms, said in an interview by RPG Gamer when asked about the protagonist being female, responded by saying, "Yes, we've always envisioned the lead character of the game to be female. In creating our lead character, Katia, our idea was to develop a character that was not the typical, over-the-top action heroes that gamers have seen time and time again, but rather a princess of a once peaceful kingdom who is definitely not used to fighting. But when an invading force threatens to destroy the kingdoms, she quickly realizes that she's the only one that has the power to save the kingdoms. Together with the guardian creature cards she's able to collect and summon, she becomes more powerful and is able to battle the evil hordes of monsters that have invaded the kingdoms." This quote supports my previous statement on Katia's character beginning as someone who is weak and grows stronger over the course of the game. It might seem like an irrelevant factor to some, but the idea of a pitifully weak starting character is essential in the Souls games and its atmosphere. I'll play a portion of the introduction of Dark Souls 2 to showcase my point.
All people come here for the same reason. To break the curse. You're no different, I should think. Doesn't stand a chance. Well, you never know. Go through the door and trot along to the kingdom. But remember, hold on to your souls. They're all that keep you from going hollow. Oh, I'll fool you no longer. You lose your souls. All of them. Over and over again.
In continuation, Katia is inherently alone. She may have some acquaintances such as Gerd and Alexander, but she doesn't have any known friends besides her father, and even then, we're not really sure on the extent of their relationship. Once clearing the plains of Roal, a description will be prompted on the map selection screen. A portion of it reads, "Her only companion on the journey is the mysterious old crone, Gerd." I always found this brutal loneliness to be a unique element to this game and its atmosphere. I remember being young and playing this game and thinking, wow, I feel lonely. No one is going to help Katia. They can't. Not without a runestone and not without the ability to use it. The runestone is the only thing that can save the world or destroy it. The cards that the runestone allows the user to use must be found, learned, and mastered. There are 5 kingdoms, each with their own runestone, but only Katia is using hers for good. This is quite a dread-filled atmosphere, and is something I would argue was heavily carried over into the Souls games, as it is much more blatant and apparent in the overall story of Lost Kingdoms compared to From Software's other older games such as Evergrace and Eternal Ring. In this chapter, I'll be going over the similarities in characters and their lore between Lost Kingdoms and the Souls games. There's a certain area in Lost Kingdoms 1 I want to look at, the Burial Grounds. When I was a kid, I would spend hours here. I kept dying over and over again, attempting to do the boss. I could never memorize the right combination to the puzzle to enter the boss fight and kept triggering random encounters, so I got to know this place pretty well. The Burial Grounds is exactly what the name entails. It's a graveyard. It's dark, rainy, and filled with enemies. It also has one of my favorite bosses in the game. It was this particular area that really reminded me of Dark Souls. There's also a couple cool things to know with enemies and lore in this area as well. There's a gravestone near the start of the area. It reads, "The first great king. Here lies Griffith the Golden, king of Alanja. Griffith, recipient of the runestone, mightiest of all warriors. He pacified the fertile borderlands. His golden mane shone like the sun, his sword was ever at the ready. Griffith the Golden, Griffith the Wise." This description reminds me a bit of Gwyn, Lord of Sunlight and Cinder. It has always been a theory that Gwyn was a king before he discovered a Lord Soul due to his royal king-like regalia. With similar names and the descriptive use of gold and the sun, it's possible that Gwyn could have been influenced by Griffith, but this is just a theory, of course. The boss in the Burial Grounds is the Necromancer, and it takes place in a gated area where the largest gravestone is present. The Necromancer rises from the ground, or maybe even out of his grave, floating and resembling a skeleton with multiple skulls around his head and outfit. He rises with 2 skeletons to fight alongside him, and can summon more skeletons to aid him if need be. This boss very much reminds me of the Grave Lord Nito boss in the Tomb of the Giants in Dark Souls. Nito is a being comprised of skeletons and rises from his casket when the cursed undead enters the area. He fights alongside multiple skeletons in an attempt to defeat the player, similarly to that of the Necromancer. Real quick, I just want to add in, I keep accidentally calling the chosen undead the cursed undead. I don't know why I keep doing this. Now, I'm not saying Lost Kingdoms is some sort of secret prequel or somehow connected to the Dark Souls universe, even though sometimes it might feel that way. What I'm trying to showcase is the creative similarities in both games and how Lost Kingdoms was a stepping stone in the development of the overall theme, atmosphere, aesthetic, among other things for the Souls series. Switching over to Demon Souls, I want to compare the old one and the God of Destruction. King Allant and Thalnos. Although they may not look similar, they both serve similar purposes in both games. In Demon Souls, King Allant is driven by a lust for power, a drive so strong that leads him to the Nexus. The Nexus being a hidden temple that binds the northern land of Balteria together. In the Nexus, King Allant awakens a long-forgotten evil, the Old One, from its eternal slumber. In the king's search for power, he becomes a servant of the Old One. After becoming allied with the Old One, he's given immense power, but ends up not being a suitable vessel for the demon power. His body becomes heavily distorted and unrecognizable. He used his power and sent back a demon to rule Boletaria, the demon being a complete doppelganger, an intimidation of himself, known as the False King. In Lost Kingdoms, Thanos has a similar fate. He has dedicated himself to become as powerful as possible, even if it destroys the world around him, including himself. During the end of the game of Lost Kingdoms, when Katia defeats Thalnos, He reveals that he cannot handle the immense power. He says, "The power, I can't hold it," followed by the god of destruction emerging out of his body, presumably killing King Thalnos in the act. The god of destruction says, "It seems he was not a suitable vessel for my power after all." Similarly to how in King Alant's search for power, he became a vessel for the Old One, but could not handle its power, essentially destroying his body. Both King Alant and Thalnos are kings of their respective kingdoms. Both of them are in an undeniable search for power. Both of them decide to awaken an ageless evil, an ageless demon below the earth out of their everlasting slumber. When they do so, they become a vessel for that demon's power, but their bodies could not handle it. It's just, the similarities are just like crazy, honestly. The Old One and the God of Destruction also share similarities. They are both responsible for their respective fog. While the Old One is awake, the colorless fog shall remain. While the God of Destruction is awake, the black fog shall persist. In both games, the fog carries with it the demons and monsters that are destroying the world. Once the Old One and the God of Destruction are sent back to rest, the fog is cleared and the demons disappear along with it. The Old One is, as the name entails, one of the oldest demons in existence and high in power. During the opening of Lost Kingdoms, it describes the awakening of the God of Destruction as the reawakening of an ageless evil. These descriptions are very similar to one another. In Lost Kingdoms 2, the God of Harmony plays a much bigger role in the game's story compared to that of the first. In the second game, King Leoid VIII, on a search for power, awakens the God of Harmony. The God of Harmony had previously sacrificed itself to lock away the God of Destruction and the God of Creation to keep them at bay prior to the events of the first game. Because of this, the good power and soul of the God of Harmony is gone, but the body remained. The body of the God of Harmony is essentially the corpse of the God of Harmony. What King Leoid VIII awakened was the body of the god. Since the body was awakened with no soul, the body of the God of Harmony began to mindlessly devour souls, as it had devolved into a monster. Much of the plot of the second game revolves around the idea of souls. In the second game, it's also revealed that when the body of the God of Harmony attacks a person, it transfers their soul from their body and into a runestone. It's interesting how Lost Kingdoms 2 had this idea of souls being consumed and being able to make an individual more powerful with those souls. I just find it interesting how both Lost Kingdoms 2 and Demon Souls have an emphasis on the idea of the demon being split from the body and the idea of souls being consumed for power. In this chapter, I'll be discussing similarities in the way the lore is told and storytelling between Lost Kingdoms and Demon Souls. The lore in Lost Kingdoms isn't very blatant, just like the Souls games. You'll need to dig to find out more about the world and the story you are in. Expect lots and lots of reading. Lost Kingdoms has no voice acting whatsoever. The second game does, but the first one does not, even though almost all of From Software's previous games did. There's lots of hidden gravestones, artifacts, soldiers, red fairies you can read and talk to along the way, but you'll probably miss a lot of it since they're not that visible and you can't go back to previous areas once a level is cleared. You also can't engage in a conversation with a red fairy more than once, so if you accidentally skip the conversation, there's no way of going back and rereading it. Unlike Demon Souls and Dark Souls, there isn't an active community putting together the lore of Lost Kingdoms and collecting data from the game to figure out hidden or missed elements to the story. So it's really easy to miss certain elements of a game or not even know elements exist at all. It's actually kind of crazy how many new things I discovered while replaying the game. I actually learned that there's 2 continents and that the land was split into 2. I always noticed that there was a divide, but I never really dug into why that was. But it's in the game, you just have to go reading for it. It's sad though how when talking to red fairies you can accidentally skip conversations by pressing the A button and such. Card descriptions in Lost Kingdoms are also very detailed. They go over unique elements in the story that would have otherwise been missed. A lot of lore in the Souls games is stored in a similar fashion, with pieces of lore being stored in item and weapon descriptions. I found it interesting how they both told their stories in a very, if you want the story, you'll need to dig for it sort of way. In this chapter, it'll be quite brief. I'll go over some similarities in the user interface and HUD design between Lost Kingdoms and Demon Souls. The similarity in the HUD design is strikingly clear. Health bar in the top left corner, and the 4 rectangular boxes for inventory, along with showcasing the buttons needed to be pressed to trigger its designated action. This is obviously similar to the HUD in Lost Kingdoms, it's crazy, where the display of Kadia's current usable cards are shown. Shower Tower Abyss, Evergrace, Kingsfield don't have anywhere near similar style of HUD design, so there was definitely inspiration taken from Lost Kingdoms into the Souls games. It's something that you might not notice, but when you do notice it, it's hard to ignore afterwards. In this chapter, I'll be going over the development team of Lost Kingdoms. There are a lot of shared important members of the development team. Masaki Sakamoto, who was the lead programmer in Lost Kingdoms, was also a programmer for Demon Souls as well as Dark Souls. Nozomi Shiba, who was a 3D modeling designer for Lost Kingdoms, was also the lead 3D graphic designer for Demon Souls, as well as a map graphic designer for Dark Souls. Takeyuki Kitazaki was a member of the planning staff in both Demon Souls and Lost Kingdoms. Naotsuchi Zin, who was the supervisor for Lost Kingdoms, was also the lead supervisor in Demon Souls, as well as Dark Souls. Makoto Sato, who was the lead 2D graphic designer in Lost Kingdoms, was also the lead graphic designer in Demon Souls, as well as Dark Souls. If you aren't already familiar with Makoto Sato's name, I assure you that you've probably seen his art before. He's probably one of the main reasons why the atmosphere in Lost Kingdoms reminded me so much of the Souls games. You can even see some hints of his older style in some Dark Souls and Demon Souls concept art. I believe the names I mentioned need to be emphasized because of their important roles in the game's development. Since some of these are leads on the development team, they must have had influence on the outcome of certain aspects of the game. Therefore, similarities between both games can be partially attributed to shared members in the development team. In this final chapter, I'll be going over combat and gameplay similarities between Lost Kingdoms and the Souls games. Although combat in Lost Kingdoms is very different from the Souls games because of its card-based combat system, there are also extremely important similarities in certain combat mechanics, such as the use of iframes, also known as invincibility frames. Iframes are one of the most crucial aspects to combat in Dark Souls and Lost Kingdoms. Dark Souls is unique with its iframes as it allows players to roll through enemy attacks to avoid damage. In every dodge you do, there is a small amount of invincibility frames in the rolling animation that allow the player to avoid damage by rolling through enemy attacks. This isn't an error or a glitch, it's an intended gameplay mechanic. In Lost Kingdoms, you are given iframes when certain cards are used, mainly summon cards. When one of these cards is used, Kadia is invincible and doesn't take any damage until the card animation is over. During a fight, there may be a time in which you are about to receive an enemy attack. Quickly choosing to use a summon card will put Kadia into an animation and allow her to take no damage, while also attacking the enemy. This is an intended gameplay mechanic, as the enemies and bosses will use this constantly. Kadia herself also does not have the ability to dodge or roll, even though bosses do, which makes me feel like originally Kadia was supposed to have the ability to dodge or roll. Summoning a card is the only way to avoid receiving incoming damage if Kadia cannot move away in time. Because of this, I think the emphasis on players using iframes in the Souls games is something that may have been influenced by his use in Lost Kingdoms. An additional gameplay mechanic I want to compare is that between the Crystal Lizards of the Souls games and the Blue Fairies of Lost Kingdoms. In the Souls games, Crystal Lizards are significantly quicker than the player. They are intended to be chased after and attacked in order to receive an upgrade stone. If the player does not catch it in time, the Crystal Lizard will disappear. In Lost Kingdoms, Blue Fairies play a similar role. Blue Fairies are scattered throughout the map and are much quicker than the player. They must be chased and caught to receive their reward. If not caught in time, they will disappear. Overall, Lost Kingdoms is a game that's oozing with mood and atmosphere. Growing up, I thought this game was the darkest, moodiest thing I've ever played. I think it does have something to do with the lack of voice acting and this very muted, dark atmosphere, very alone. Some areas like Blasoon were just super dark and disturbing almost. There's something to these games that are just so reminiscent of the Souls games. I've seen gameplay of Kingsfield and it just doesn't give me the same vibe. If you have Lost Kingdoms, go back and play it and you might know what I'm talking about. If you've never played Lost Kingdoms before and this is your first time hearing about the game, then maybe you should put it off because Lost Kingdoms is like $50 on eBay and Lost Kingdoms 2 is over $200. Not sure why. Too bad GameCube games and other PS2, that era of games have skyrocketed in pricing. It's quite sad, but I feel like there's a bunch of other things I could get into that I just haven't found the right connections to make with them yet. I had a lot of fun making this video, and going back and playing Lost Kingdoms was definitely a nostalgia trip. I originally made this video and uploaded it, and it was 12 minutes long, but I honestly wasn't happy with the results of it. I felt like I could have put much more effort into that video, so I decided to completely redo it, and well, here we are. Hopefully, I put more effort into this time. I also personally added a bunch of information along with some pages to the Lost Kingdoms wiki, if you guys want to read more about the games yourselves. I will most likely continue to make more Lost Kingdoms content in the future as I'm trying to put out more videos. I'm definitely going to make more videos focused on the lore of Lost Kingdoms, since it's not really talked that much about. Hopefully you guys learned something interesting in this video. If you guys have any recommendations on videos and topics I should cover, I'd be more than willing to do so. Thanks for watching, and subscribe if you'd like.